When I opened my eyes, the first thing I saw was Karen in Kevin's arms. They weren't crying. They weren't overwhelmed with joy. They were holding each other like I was already dead. For a moment, I wondered if maybe I still was. Maybe this was hell, watching the two people I trusted most betray me right in front of my face. Kevin saw me first. He stiffened, but didn't let go of her. Karen turned, slow and hesitant, like facing a ghost she didn't want to see. Her mouth opened and closed before she finally managed a strained whisper. "Brian, you're awake." Her voice held none of the love I remembered. No rush forward to hold me. No tears of joy. Nothing. Just uncomfortable guilt and the faintest tremble in her hands. I tried to speak, but my throat was too dry. The machine beeped beside me, slow and steady, the only sign that I was really alive. Kevin coughed into his fist. "We're happy you pulled through, buddy." Buddy. As if the arm around my wife wasn't enough of a betrayal, he had the audacity to call me that. I closed my eyes again, forcing my body to stay still, my breathing even. I wasn't strong enough to fight them. Not yet. But the fire in my chest, burning so bright it hurt, told me one thing. I would be. I didn't know how long they stood there waiting for me to respond. I didn't care. When I finally heard the door click shut, I opened my eyes again and smiled. They thought they had won. They thought I was too broken to fight. They thought wrong. They had 3 years to forget about me. I only needed a few months to make sure they regretted it for the rest of their lives. I was never supposed to end up like this. Before the accident, I had everything: a stable job in finance, a decent house, a loyal group of friends. Most of all, I had Karen. She wasn't the loudest girl in the room. She didn't have the flashiest smile or the most expensive taste, but she was mine. We met at a campus party during senior year. While everyone else drank themselves stupid, she sat alone in the corner with a book. I liked that about her immediately. Quiet, thoughtful, sharp in ways no one else noticed. We started dating a week later, moved in together within 6 months, married after 1 year. Simple, fast, certain. Kevin was there too, of course. He had been my roommate back in freshman year, the kind of guy everyone liked. Charming, funny, always ready with a beer and a bad idea. But where I matured and focused, Kevin drifted, bounced between jobs, women, ambitions he never quite finished. I thought he envied me a little, the career, the house, the steady relationship, but he never said anything. He was my best friend. I trusted him. When Karen and I bought our first home, Kevin helped paint the walls. When we had our first big fight about money, Kevin brought over takeout and played peacekeeper. When I got promoted, Kevin was the one who threw the party. When I bought Karen a ring for our 5th anniversary, Kevin helped me pick it out. I never saw the cracks forming. Not until it was too late. The night of the accident is a blur in my memory. I was driving home from a late meeting. Karen had called, asking if I wanted her to wait up. I told her no, told her to sleep. The last thing I remember is headlights flashing too close and a horn blaring. Then, darkness. 3 years of it. In that time, everything I knew crumbled while I was trapped in a body that couldn't move, a mind that couldn't wake. Karen visited at first, they told me. The first few months, almost daily, holding my hand, whispering updates about the world. Then once a week, then once a month, then barely at all. Kevin visited too, they said. Sometimes alone, sometimes with Karen, sometimes not at all. The nurses stopped expecting anyone after the first year. Everyone moved on except me. Lying there, forgotten, gathering dust like an old photograph no one wanted to look at anymore. Now, awake, I saw the truth. Karen's smiles for Kevin weren't new. They were well-practiced, comfortable. They had built a life together while I was still technically breathing, and the worst part? I didn't even feel anger, not yet. Only a cold, calculating resolve. When I was strong enough, I would get out of this bed. When I was strong enough, I would walk out of this hospital. When I was strong enough, I would take back everything they tried to bury with me. Karen once told me she loved my quiet strength. That's what drew her to me, that I didn't yell, didn't brag, didn't throw my weight around. She thought it made her feel safe. Now, it would be the thing she feared most. Because I wouldn't shout, I wouldn't scream, would dismantle their new little world with the same quiet patience that once made her fall in love with me. Kevin always thought he was the smarter one, the smoother talker, the bigger presence in any room. He never realized that the loudest person is often the easiest to beat. All you have to do is wait for them to trip over their own ego. And Karen, she would soon learn that betrayal is like a debt. It always comes due. There was a knock on my hospital room door. A nurse poked her head in. "Brian, you have another visitor." I expected Karen again, maybe Kevin trying to play the concerned friend. Instead, a woman with short dark hair and worried eyes stepped inside. Mary, Karen's younger sister. She was 5 years younger than Karen. Still in college when we got married, she used to look up to me, calling me the guy who made love seem real. Mary had moved out of state for grad school 2 years before my accident. I hadn't seen her since. Now she stood at the foot of my bed, clutching her purse like a shield. "Hey, Brian," she said, her voice thick with emotion. I'm so sorry." I nodded once. My throat still burned when I spoke, so I stayed silent. Mary stepped closer, hesitated, then leaned down and hugged me carefully. She smelled like lavender and something bitter underneath. Grief, maybe. "I just found out a week ago," she whispered. "I had no idea what they were doing." I closed my eyes briefly, letting the comfort of her honesty settle over me. One ally. That was all I needed to start. One person who remembered who I was before the world decided to forget. I wasn't alone after all, and neither Kevin nor Karen had any idea the war they had just started. Recovery was slow. Tubes were removed one by one. I started standing with help, walking a few shaky steps at a time. All the while, Karen visited less. Kevin almost never came after that first day. It wasn't hard to guess why. They had already built a life without me. Now my survival was an inconvenience they didn't know how to handle. Mary stayed, though. She showed up almost daily. Sometimes bringing me books, sometimes just sitting silently, giving me company without asking for anything in return. It was her who told me the rest of the truth. One evening, she wheeled me out to the hospital garden, and we sat under a half-dead oak tree. The fall air was crisp, the leaves dry and brittle against the wind. "I know about Kevin," she said quietly. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. "He moved into your house 6 months after your accident," Mary continued, her voice trembling. "He told everyone it was just to help Karen cope. But it wasn't long before they started acting like a couple." I kept my face still, my hands resting lightly on the blanket over my lap. "And Kevin's been managing your finances too," she added. I turned to her, my eyes narrowing. Karen gave him power of attorney. The words dropped like stones. In 3 years, they hadn't just forgotten about me. They'd begun selling off pieces of my life. I forced myself to stay calm. Rage wouldn't help. Not yet. "Do you know if they—" I asked, voice raw from disuse. Mary hesitated. "They're not even really hiding it anymore," she admitted. "They wear rings sometimes when they're out. Not wedding rings, but close enough." My fingers curled slowly. Into fists. They had replaced me. Publicly. Boldly. As if I would never wake up to see it. "They didn't even wait for a confirmation you wouldn't make it," Mary said bitterly. "They just moved on." I looked up at the darkening sky. The stars hadn't changed, only the people I once trusted had. A nurse came out to call Mary back inside for visiting hours. Before she left, she gripped my hand. I'm still with you, Brian," she said fiercely. "I'll help however I can." I nodded, my throat too tight for words. As she disappeared inside, I stared out across the garden. I didn't feel abandoned. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt sharpened. The first thing I needed to do was get my life back, quietly, carefully, without warning. When I was discharged from the hospital 3 weeks later, Karen showed up to drive me home. She wore a bright smile, her hair perfectly styled, her clothes designer casual. She acted like nothing had happened, as if 3 years meant nothing at all. Kevin wasn't with her. Maybe they thought better than to flaunt it now. Karen buckled me into the passenger seat like I was a child. Talked the entire ride about renovations she made, investments she managed, how stressful everything had been without me. I listened in silence. When we pulled into the driveway, my stomach twisted. The house was still ours, but it felt wrong. The porch had new furniture. The yard was full of plants I didn't recognize. Even the doorknob had been changed. I didn't belong here anymore, not in the way they expected me to. Karen helped me inside, showed me to the guest bedroom. Not our bedroom, the guest bedroom. I thought you might want your own. Space while you recover, she said with a forced cheeriness. I nodded slowly. Of course, I said, voice flat. That night, I lay awake staring at the unfamiliar ceiling. I could hear her moving around upstairs, could almost hear Kevin's voice from the phone. I heard her soft laughter, the laugh I once thought was just for me. In that moment, whatever fragile hope might have survived inside me shattered completely. This wasn't my wife anymore. This wasn't my home. This was a battlefield, and I intended to win. The next morning, I wheeled myself into the living room. Kevin sat on the couch, shirtless, drinking coffee like he owned the place. Karen flitted around the kitchen in leggings and a tank top, humming. Both froze when they saw me. For one perfect second, the mask slipped from Karen's face. Shock, guilt, annoyance, all there, raw and real, before she smoothed it away. "Good morning, Brian," she chirped. "You're up early." Kevin muttered something that sounded like awkward under his breath and disappeared. Down the hall, Karen sat on the arm of the couch, studying me carefully. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Like a man who overslept and missed everything important," I said calmly. She laughed a little too loud. "You're still recovering," she said, quickly. "No need to rush anything." "No," I agreed softly. "No need to rush." But I wasn't talking about recovery. I was talking about revenge. Because now that I was awake, every single debt was going to be paid in full. The days blurred into each other. Spent most of my time pretending to sleep, pretending not to notice the small looks Karen and Kevin shared across the room. Pretending. I didn't hear the muted giggles late at night through the thin walls. They thought I was still weak, still broken, still the same man they abandoned in a hospital bed. But inside, something colder and sharper was building. A quiet rage. Not the wild, reckless anger that burns and destroys everything. No, this was different. This anger was patient, calculated. Every smile Karen gave me, pretending to care, every fake conversation Kevin tried to make over coffee, every patronizing pat on the shoulder, every sidelong glance of pity or guilt, I stored them all away like weapons. I wasn't the same Brian they had left behind. They just hadn't figured it out yet. I could feel the distance between us like a physical thing, the three of us trapped under one roof, dancing around each other. Karen avoided me during the day, finding errands to run, reasons to leave. Kevin stayed out late most nights, coming home with the smell of cheap alcohol clinging to his clothes. Maybe the guilt was finally catching up to him, or maybe he realized he'd won a prize that wasn't worth the cost. It didn't matter. I didn't need their remorse. I didn't need their apologies. I needed them to pay, and pay they would. The hardest part was keeping my face blank. Not reacting when Kevin bragged about small victories at work. Not flinching when Karen complained about the hospital bills she had to shoulder alone. Not smiling when I overheard Karen's whispered argument with Kevin one night about how things weren't supposed to be this hard after I woke up. Their cracks were showing. It was only a matter of time. But the nights were the worst. lying alone, in the guest bedroom, staring at the dark ceiling, listening to the sound of two people who had once been my entire world, now treating me like a burden they couldn't wait to shed. That was when the doubts crept in. The ugly, bitter questions. Was I the fool for ever trusting them? Was I the weak one for not seeing it sooner? Did Karen ever love me at all? Or was it always just convenience, stability, security? I had given her everything, every piece of myself. And when I could no longer provide what she wanted, she simply traded me in for a newer model. Kevin, the man who had stood beside me at my wedding, the man who had toasted to our forever with a wide grin and a hearty slap on the back, the man who had betrayed me with the woman I loved. I clenched my fists under the blanket until my knuckles ached. No, I wouldn't drown in these thoughts. I wouldn't let their betrayal break me twice. If they thought the old Brian, the trusting, forgiving Brian, still existed, they were about to learn how wrong they were. Mary became my lifeline. During her visits, she brought me pieces of the outside world, updates on my frozen accounts, whispers about Karen's spending habits, rumors about Kevin losing money in shady investments. They were overconfident, careless, arrogant. They believed they had all the time in the world to drain what was left of my life. I smiled at the irony. The clock was ticking, just not for me. Late one night, after another staged dinner where Karen forced a smile and Kevin barely made eye contact, I rolled back into my room and stared at the ceiling. I thought about the man I had been, the man who believed love was enough, the man who believed friendship was sacred. That man was gone, buried with the 3 years they stole from me. What remained was something new, something ruthless. I didn't just want to survive anymore. I wanted to thrive. And I wanted them to watch. Watch as I built a life so far beyond their reach, they would choke on their regret. Watch as I rose from the ashes they thought they left behind. Watch as I became a man they couldn't even recognize anymore. The suspense gnawed at me in the quiet hours, the knowledge that I was close, so close to being strong enough to act. But not yet. Not yet. Patience. It would be the sharpest weapon I had. I would let them think they were winning. Let them believe their new life was solid, untouchable, until the ground crumbled beneath their feet. Until the day Karen woke up and realized she had gambled away the one man who would have loved her until his last breath. Until Kevin understood he had traded loyalty for a prize that would poison him from the inside out. I closed my eyes that night and smiled, not out of happiness, not out of hope, but because revenge was no longer just a possibility. It was inevitable, and it was coming. It happened faster than I expected. One afternoon, Mary burst into the house, her face pale and panicked. Karen wasn't home. Kevin was passed out on the couch, a half-empty whiskey bottle dangling from his hand. Mary pulled me aside into the kitchen, her voice shaking. "Brian, you need to see this." She handed me her phone. On the screen was an article from a local business journal. Kevin's name splashed across the headline, "Fraud Embezzlement, Pending Criminal Investigation." I stared at the words for a long time, letting them sink in like slow poison. Kevin hadn't just stolen from me. He had stolen from other investors too, friends, partners, and now the walls were closing in on him. "He's been funneling money through fake companies," Mary said, her voice tight. Karen helped. "She signed papers without reading them, thinking it was all part of your investment portfolio." I closed my eyes. Of course. She had gotten greedy. Instead of just replacing me in her personal life, she had tried to replace me in my professional life too, and now it was all collapsing around them. I opened my eyes slowly, my mind already working through the implications. "How long before they come after me?" I asked quietly. Mary shook her head. "You're clean. They kept everything under Kevin's and Karen's names. You're safe." Relief washed over me for a brief second, but it was cold and short-lived. I wasn't satisfied with being safe. I wanted justice. The real kind. The kind you feel in your bones when the people who tried to bury you get buried instead. I wheeled myself back into the living room, studying Kevin's drunken form. This was a man who once toasted my success. Now he was nothing but a crumbling mess, dragged down by his own greed. Karen stumbled through the door 20 minutes later, holding a shopping bag in one hand and her phone in the other. Her eyes widened when she saw Mary. Then she spotted the article open on the table. Her face drained of color. "Where did you get that?" she snapped. Mary stood her ground. "It's public now. Everyone's going to know soon." Karen's gaze flickered to me, desperate, calculating. "Brian, listen, it's not what it looks like. Kevin made mistakes, but we can fix it. As if I was still part of her world, I said nothing, let her squirm. "Brian, please," she said, stepping closer. "I'll fix it. I'll do whatever it takes." Kevin groaned from the couch, waking at the noise. When he saw the article, he swore loudly, stumbling to his feet. "You have to help me," he said, pointing, a shaking finger at me. "You owe me," I laughed then. The first real laugh I'd had in 3 years. "Help you?" I said, my voice calm, almost amused. "I owe you." Kevin flushed deep red, his anger mixing with shame. "You don't understand?" "No," I cut him off coldly. "You don't understand. You and Karen made your choices. Now you get to live. With them." Karen clutched my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "Brian, think about your reputation. If this gets out, people will think you were involved too." I pulled my arm free and stared at her, seeing her clearly for the first time. She wasn't scared for me. She was scared for herself. Scared that the empire she tried to build on my corpse was crumbling faster than she could save it. Scared that her name would be dragged through the mud she helped create. Good. Let her be scared. Let her feel a fraction of the helplessness she left me with. Mary stood behind me, silent, solid, a reminder that not everyone had betrayed me, that I wasn't alone. Karen realized then that she had lost me for good. I saw it in her eyes, the way they dimmed, the way her shoulders sagged. But she wasn't the type to give up. Gracefully. Not Karen, not the woman who once promised to love me forever and broke that vow the moment it became inconvenient. No, she would fight, and that was exactly what I wanted. Because the more she fought, the deeper she would sink. Kevin stumbled toward the door, mumbling something about needing a lawyer. Karen followed him, shouting, pleading, trying to salvage the disaster they created together, and I sat there, calm and still, watching it all unfold. The storm had begun, and this time, I wasn't the one drowning. I was the one steering it straight toward them. The collapse happened faster than anyone expected. Kevin's arrest made the news within days. The authorities found fake companies, offshore accounts, piles of falsified paperwork, and Karen's name appeared enough times to guarantee she wouldn't escape scrutiny. She came home that evening like a woman marching to the gallows. Her hands shook as she closed the door behind her. I sat at the kitchen table, drinking a quiet cup of tea. She stood there, clutching her bag, her face pale, her mouth working like she wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. Finally, she managed, "Brian, we need to talk." I gestured calmly to the chair across from me. She sat heavily, sagging like all the fight had drained from her bones. "I didn't know," she said. "I didn't know Kevin was doing those things." I said nothing. The silence between us stretched thin, brittle, like a spider's web ready to snap. Karen reached across the table, her hand trembling. "I was scared," she whispered. After the accident, I didn't know what to do. Kevin was just there. He helped me. He supported me. I thought you were never coming back." I looked down at her hand but didn't take it. "You thought I was dead," I said finally, voice low. She nodded, tears spilling from her eyes. And when I wasn't dead, I continued, you wished I was. She flinched as if I had struck her. You have to understand, she said desperately. I had no money, no help. Kevin betrayed me, I interrupted sharply, and you let him. You chose him. The silence swallowed us again. Karen bowed her head, wiping at her cheeks. I made mistakes, she said hoarsely. But we can fix this, you and me. We can fight this together. I laughed then, a cold, hollow sound. There's no we, Karen, I said. Not anymore. She shook her head violently. I still love you, Brian. I never stopped. Another lie. Another pitiful, desperate lie. If you loved me, I said softly, you would have waited. You would have fought for me. You wouldn't have handed over everything we built to a man who couldn't even take care of himself. She tried to reach for me again, but I pushed back my chair and stood. Even on shaky legs, even with every muscle screaming in protest, I stood taller than I ever had before. You and Kevin deserve each other, I said, both of you chasing after what you thought you deserved, and losing it all in the process. Karen stood too, tears streaking her makeup. I can make it right, she begged. I'll sell the house. I'll pay back the investors. I'll stand by you, I swear it. I stared at her, the woman I had once vowed to love until death parted us. The woman who had left me for dead long before my heart ever stopped beating. No, I said simply. You won't stand by me. You won't fix anything, because you're not capable of loyalty or honesty or love. Her face crumpled. Brian, please, don't throw away everything we had. You threw it away, I said. You threw it away the moment you let another man into our bed, into our life. The moment you signed my future away without blinking. The front door burst open. Mary stood there, panting, a manila folder clutched in her hand. She marched in, her jaw set, her eyes burning. I got it, she said, handing the folder to me. Inside were documents, proof of Karen's involvement in the fraud, bank records, emails, signed agreements, all carefully collected by Mary, who had quietly dug through Karen's private files while pretending to be the supportive little sister. Karen's mouth fell open as she realized what Mary had done. You little snake, she gasped. Mary smiled sweetly. Funny, she said. Coming from you. I leafed through the papers slowly, savoring Karen's growing panic. You set me up, she hissed. You were supposed to help me. Mary shrugged. I'm helping the person who deserves it. Karen backed away, bumping into the table. Her voice dropped to a whimper. Brian, if you do this, they'll take everything. I'll have nothing. I met her eyes, calm and unflinching. Exactly. Later that evening, after Karen had fled to God knows where, Mary and I sat in the living room, the silence between us, comfortable for once. You okay? She asked. I nodded. I will be. Mary hesitated. You know, not everyone would have fought the way you did. Most people would have given up. I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. She wasn't the little sister anymore. She had become a woman forged by betrayal and loyalty both. You saved me, I said quietly. And you saved yourself, she replied, smiling. Weeks later, Karen's assets were frozen. Kevin was formally charged and denied bail. My name was cleared publicly and privately. The house was sold at auction. I watched. From a distance as Karen packed up the last of her belongings, a small, broken figure against the cold, empty shell that used to be our home. She didn't see me, didn't know I was there. I didn't need her to. Some goodbyes didn't need words. Turned and walked away, not looking back once. Mary met me by the car. Ready? She asked. I nodded. We drove out of the city that day, windows down, the wind carrying away the last broken pieces of the man I used to be. I didn't know what the future held, didn't know if I was ready to love again, trust again, risk again. But I knew one thing for certain. I had survived, and from now on I wasn't living for anyone else, just me. Whatever came next, I would face it standing tall, head high, scars and all. The past was ashes. The future was mine to build, and this time, I wasn't going to let anyone steal it from me. The first official day of my new life began with silence. Not the heavy, suffocating silence of betrayal. Not the silence of a hospital room filled with pity and grief. But clean, open silence. Freedom. Moved into a small loft overlooking the city. It wasn't big, it wasn't grand, but it was mine. Paid for by funds Kevin and Karen could never touch, hidden away long before any of them thought to dig. Mary helped me set it up, bringing plants, books, little signs of life to replace the years lost to a coma and a crumbling marriage. She smiled a lot now, a real smile, not the forced polite ones she used to wear when visiting the old house. In her eyes, I found something steady, something unbroken. It didn't need to be rushed, didn't need to be named, it just was. The media had a field day with Karen and Kevin's downfall. Photos of Karen leaving court, head down, sunglasses hiding nothing, were plastered across every news outlet. Kevin's mugshot, dazed and furious, became a meme overnight. Every old friend who had once cheered at our wedding sent me texts now, pretending they had always been on my side. I didn't reply to a single one. The past was a graveyard. I wasn't going. Back to mourn it. A few months later, I heard Karen tried to sell some jewelry to cover her legal fees. Jewelry I had given her once, in another lifetime, believing love could be measured in gifts and promises. She got pennies on the dollar. Fitting. Kevin, meanwhile, tried to cut a deal, offering to turn over everything he knew about Karen's involvement to reduce his sentence. The prosecutors didn't need him. Mary's evidence was more than enough. In the end, he was sentenced to 6 years in prison. Karen wasn't so lucky. She faced civil lawsuits from investors she had defrauded under Kevin's scheme. She lost everything: her accounts, her reputation, her freedom. When the final judgment came, she had no choice but to declare bankruptcy. The last I heard, she was living with a distant cousin in a rundown apartment on the edge of town. No job, no friends, no Kevin. He had cut all ties with her from behind prison walls, blaming her for everything, exactly as cowards do. I didn't attend the hearings, didn't watch the news reports, didn't need to. My revenge was never about shouting at them, never about fighting in the dirt. It was about rising so far above them that they would suffocate on their own failures without me having to lift a hand. True power was in not even needing to look back. I focused on rebuilding what mattered: my name, my business, my life. Mary offered to help, and I let her. Not because I needed rescuing, those days were over, but because sometimes rebuilding is faster with hands that don't tremble when they reach for you. Hands that know what it feels like to be left behind. Together, we created something stronger than before. A consultancy firm, small but fierce, carving out its own niche in the market. The first client was a former rival who once looked down on me. He signed the contract with a handshake so tight I thought his fingers might break. Victory tasted even sweeter when it was served cold and clean. Not everyone knew the full story behind my comeback. They didn't need to. The people who mattered knew, and the ones who didn't matter could believe whatever they liked. One evening, months after everything had settled, I found myself walking along the riverbank at sunset. The water shimmered gold and red. The city skyline blazed behind it like a crown. Mary walked beside me, quiet, hands in her coat pockets. We didn't talk. Much. We didn't have to. The peace between us said more than words ever could. Halfway down the path, we passed a small outdoor cafe. I saw a figure sitting alone at a table, nursing a chipped mug of coffee. Karen. She didn't see me at first. Her hair was limp, tied back hastily. Her clothes were plain, worn. She looked up briefly, her eyes scanning the crowd out of habit, and then she saw me. Her face froze. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The past hung between us like a ghost. Karen opened her mouth, maybe to call out, maybe to beg. I simply turned away, kept walking. Mary glanced at me but said nothing. She didn't have to. Some things were too broken to be fixed. Some debts were too deep to forgive. Karen had gambled on my weakness, bet everything that I would come, crawling back. She lost. I didn't even need to raise my voice to win. I didn't need to tear her down with my hands. She destroyed herself. That was the real revenge. Seeing her sit there, a shadow of the woman who once thought she could rule my life. Seeing her realize too late that she was nothing without the man she betrayed. And me? I was alive, stronger, smarter, free. The past had tried to kill me, but I had buried it instead, and now every step I took forward was a reminder that no matter how deep they had tried to bury me, I had grown roots in the dark, and I had bloomed. The sun dipped lower, casting the world in a soft, forgiving light. I breathed it in, deep and full. Mary smiled at me, a real smile, warm and waiting. I smiled back without hesitation. The future stretched out before me, wide and open, no longer chained to the ghosts of betrayal. I didn't need revenge anymore. I had something far better. Peace. And they would have to live every day knowing they had given it to me without ever meaning to. True revenge isn't about destruction. It's about survival. It's about rising so high that the ones who tried to drown you can only stare up from the bottom, choking on their regrets. And that's exactly what I had done. I survived. I thrived. And as the river sparkled beside me and the city breathed at my back, I knew one final, unshakable truth. They lost, and I won.